Imagine an opulent royal wedding, a celebration of love, power, and the future of an entire bloodline. Now, picture that joyous occasion transforming, in a single, horrifying moment, into a meticulously orchestrated scene of death. For centuries, the truth behind the demise of Princess Isabella and Prince Tierry on their wedding day has been shrouded in whispers and speculation. What if everything you thought you knew about royal assassinations, about the very nature of power itself, was a carefully constructed lie designed to conceal an unspeakable act? This isn't just a historical anecdote. It's a chilling expose into the darkest corners of human ambition, where the desire for control poisons everything it touches. We're not talking about a simple accident or a lone, deranged killer. This was a calculated strike, a precise act of extermination aimed at wiping out a lineage, a threat so profound that its architects went to unimaginable lengths to erase all traces of their involvement. Every bite of the wedding feast, every toast raised, was a step closer to a horrifying end. You will discover the forbidden secrets of a court consumed by intrigue, where allies became enemies overnight, and trust was a luxury no one could afford. What was the motive so powerful, so desperate that it could justify the eradication of an entire royal family, including innocent children? The answer lies buried beneath layers of deception within the very fabric of power itself. Princess Isabella, vibrant and full of promise, had no idea that her wedding gown would become her shroud, that the vows exchanged would be her last words. Her story, and Tierry's, is a testament to the brutal realities of power, where even the most sacred bonds can be shattered by a hidden hand. In the next few minutes, we will peel back the layers of a historical cover-up, revealing not just who died, but why, and the terrifying lengths someone went to ensure their silence was absolute. What truly happened the moment Isabella raised that poisoned chalice to her lips? The truth is far more sinister than any legend. The year is 1565. Sunlight, thick and golden, streamed through the arched windows of the Château de Montaigne, illuminating dust motes dancing in the ancient air. Today was meant to be a day of unparalleled joy, a union that would solidify two powerful European houses and bring an end to generations of simmering animosity. Isabella, daughter of Duke Armand of Montaigne, stood before a grand mirror, her reflection shimmering in the silk and lace of her wedding gown. Her heart, however, was not filled with the lightness of a bride. A cold dread, persistent as the winter fog that often clung to the valleys of Montaigne, had settled deep within her. Isabella was no stranger to the intricate dance of court politics. From a young age, she had been groomed for a life of duty, understanding that her personal desires were secondary to the needs of her lineage. Her betrothal to Tierry, the formidable Prince of Valois, had been hailed as a diplomatic triumph, a bridge built between two nations weary of conflict. Yet, for Isabella, it felt more like a sacrifice. She admired Thierry's strength and his sharp mind, but there was an unsettling glint in his eyes, a possessiveness that chilled her to the bone. She had seen it in the way he spoke of their future, not as a partnership, but as an acquisition. Just yesterday, a small, unmarked package had appeared on her dressing table, nestled amidst her bridal jewels. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was a single, withered rose, its petals a morbid, almost black hue. A note penned in elegant, unfamiliar script lay beneath it. Some unions are forged in fire, others dissolved in ice. Beware the sweetness that conceals the bitter end. Isabella had dismissed it as a crude prank, a last-ditch effort by some disgruntled suitor, but the image of that dark rose had haunted her dreams. Now, as the trumpet sounded, signaling the arrival of the wedding procession, Isabella felt the weight of the crown she was about to wear, not just on her head, but on her very soul. She was marrying into a world of immense power, but also of insidious shadows. The Château de Montaigne, usually a sanctuary of peace, seemed to hum with an unspoken tension, a silent witness to the impending ceremony. Isabella took a deep, trembling breath. She was about to step into a future she could barely discern, a future where the line between love and peril seemed impossibly thin. The wedding feast, prepared with such meticulous care, promised a lavish display of wealth and culinary artistry, but Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was being served. Isabella's fingers traced the morbid outline of the withered rose, its edges brittle, almost crumbling beneath her touch. The air in her chambers, usually sweet with the scent of lavender and polished wood, now seemed to carry a faint, metallic tang, like old blood. Who could have sent such a thing? Was it a warning, a threat, or simply a cruel jest? Her mind raced, sifting through the faces of those who might wish her ill. The court of Montaigne was a viper's nest, full of whispers and hidden agendas. She had learned early to trust few, but this felt different, more personal, more chilling than the usual political machinations. The rose was not merely a symbol. It felt like a prophecy. Isabella remembered the old tales her nursemaid used to whisper, of curses woven into blossoms, of love turned to poison. She dismissed it as superstition, yet the cold dread intensified. She thought of Tierry, his possessive gaze, the way his hand had lingered on her arm a moment too long during their last meeting. He was powerful, ambitious, and utterly ruthless when he needed to be. Could he be involved in such a macabre message? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but it felt too crude for his calculated mind. Tierry preferred open displays of power, not veiled rites. The morning light, once a symbol of hope, now felt like an unwelcome spotlight, exposing her vulnerability. Isabella closed her eyes, trying to conjure the image of her mother, the late Duchess Alara, a woman of formidable will and unwavering composure. Her mother would have known what to do, how to navigate this treacherous current. But Isabella was alone, navigating a labyrinth of court intrigue and personal fear. She had always prided herself on her pragmatism, her ability to see situations clearly. But this withered rose clouded her judgment, stirring an unsettling mix of anger and terror. As the castle bustled with final preparations for the feast, Isabella felt an increasing sense of isolation. Her ladies-in-waiting, excited by the prospect of the royal wedding, chattered idly about gowns and jewels, oblivious to the silent battle raging within their mistress. How could she tell them of the rose, of the chilling premonition that clung to her like a shroud? They would dismiss it as bridal nerves, a flight of fancy. No, this was a burden Isabella had to bear alone. The more she considered the rose, the more it felt like a direct challenge, a dark promise from an unseen enemy. The wedding feast, meant to be a celebration of new beginnings, now loomed as a potential stage for something far more sinister, a chilling culmination of the veiled threat symbolized by the decaying bloom. The withered rose, a silent harbinger, had cast a long shadow over Isabella's preparations. Every rustle of her gown, every whisper from a lady-in-waiting, seemed to carry an undertone of the chilling message it conveyed. The vibrant tapestry of the wedding day, once a symbol of hope, now felt frayed at the edges, a fragile facade over an abyss of uncertainty. Isabella, despite the ornate finery that adorned her, felt a profound vulnerability, a chilling premonition that tightened its grip with each passing moment. As the hour of the ceremony approached, the chateau buzzed with an almost feverish energy. Nobles from distant lands, their faces a mosaic of curiosity and calculation, filled the great hall. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and beeswax, hummed with anticipation, yet for Isabella, it was laced with a metallic tang of fear. She could feel the weight of centuries of expectation pressing down on her, the burden of two powerful houses resting on her slender shoulders. The union was not merely a marriage, it was a political maneuver of immense scale, and the stakes, she now understood, were far higher than she had ever imagined. Her gaze drifted to the window, the golden sunlight now beginning to wane, casting long, dramatic shadows across the courtyard. It was in that fleeting moment, as a raven circled high above the ancient battlements, that a new, more unsettling thought began to take root in Isabella's mind. The rose, she mused, was not just a threat. It was a warning, a desperate plea from someone who knew the true nature of the impending Ion. But who would dare to send such a message, and why? The possibilities swirled in her mind, each more terrifying than the last. Was it a jilted lover of Tierry's, a rival house seeking to destabilize the alliance, or something far more insidious, a secret within the very walls of Montaigne itself? Isabella tried to dismiss the thought, to focus on the intricate embroidery of her veil, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. She began to reevaluate every polite smile, every hushed conversation, every seemingly innocuous gesture. The court, once a familiar stage for diplomatic charades, now appeared as a labyrinth of hidden motives and veiled intentions. The faces that had seemed so jovial moments before now held an unsettling ambiguity. The very air seemed to thicken with unspoken secrets, each breath Isabella took feeling heavier than the last. The grand doors of her chamber swung open, and her father, Duke Armand, entered, his face beaming with pride. He saw only the beautiful bride, the successful culmination of his lifelong ambitions. He saw the triumph, not the terror that gnawed at his daughter's heart. Isabella forced a smile, a practiced mask of serene joy, but inside, her mind raced, piecing together fragments of whispers, fleeting glances, and the ominous silence that had followed the discovery of the withered rose. The celebration was about to begin, but for Isabella, the true drama had already unfolded, transforming a day of joy into a crucible of dread. The wedding feast was not just a meal. It was a stage, and she, the unwitting protagonist, was about to step into a scene she never wished to play. The grand hall of Château de Montaigne hummed with a false gaiety, a thin veneer over the unspoken tension. Isabella, regal in her heavy gown, moved through the throng like a ghost, her smile a brittle mask. Each congratulatory whisper, every clink of a champagne flute, felt like a hammer blow against her fragile composure. Tierry, oblivious or uncaring, held court by the massive fireplace, his laughter echoing a little too loudly, his eyes sweeping over the assembled guests with an almost predatory satisfaction. Isabella's gaze, however, kept returning to the untouched goblet of wine placed before her at the head table. It shimmered in the candlelight, innocent yet menacing. The withered rose, still vivid in her mind, had poisoned her perception of everything around her. Was this the moment? Was this the vessel for the grim prophecy? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her, the expectations of 2 kingdoms resting on her slender shoulders. To refuse the wine would be an act of open defiance, an insult that could shatter the fragile peace her marriage was meant to forge. To drink it. The thought sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the chill of the ancient stone walls. She saw her father, Duke Armand, across the hall, his face etched with pride and relief. He believed this union secured their future, unaware of the deadly game unfolding beneath the surface. Isabella longed to run to him, to whisper her fears, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain a withered rose and a premonition of death without sounding like a mad woman? The court was a viper's nest, and any sign of weakness, any hint of instability, would be exploited. A servant approached, bowing deeply, offering Isabella a small, exquisite tart. She politely declined, her stomach churning with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Every gesture, every offering, was now suspect. The air grew thick with anticipation as the toast began. Tierry raised his goblet first, his voice booming as he spoke of their future, of dynasties intertwined, of an era of unprecedented prosperity. Isabella watched him, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. He took a long, deliberate sip from his own goblet, his eyes meeting hers over the rim, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher in their depths. Then it was her turn. A hush fell over the hall. All eyes turned to Isabella. Her hand trembled as she reached for her goblet, the cold crystal a stark contrast to the sudden fever that gripped her. This was it, the moment of truth. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to flee, but the weight of her duty, the legacy of her bloodline, held her captive. Her fingers closed around the stem, lifting the goblet slowly, inexorably, towards her lips. The fate of 2 kingdoms, and her own life, hung in the balance. A strange, almost ethereal calm descended upon Isabella as her fingers tightened around the goblet's stem. The weight of it, the coolness of the metal against her skin, felt impossibly heavy, yet strangely grounding. She saw Tierry's expectant gaze, a predatory gleam in his eyes that had always unnerved her, now magnified by the flickering candlelight. He was waiting, watching her, a silent challenge in his posture. The faces of the assembled court blurred into an indistinguishable tapestry of silks and jewels, their collective breath held in anticipation. This was it. The culmination of a lifetime of duty, a future she never truly desired, now teetering on the precipice of a single, irreversible act. But then, a flicker. Not of fear, but of defiance. It was a tiny spark, born from the depths of her being, fueled by the memory of that withered rose and the chilling message it conveyed. This was not just about her life. It was about her agency, her very soul. She had been a pawn for too long, a bargaining chip in a game played by powerful men. A cold certainty settled over Isabella. She would not be sacrificed. Not like this. Just as the goblet neared her lips, her gaze swept across the hall, locking onto the familiar, worried eyes of her lady-in-waiting, Alara, standing discreetly near the grand archway. Alara, who had served Isabella since childhood, knew her every tell, every subtle shift in her demeanor. In that brief, silent exchange, a plan, desperate and daring, solidified in Isabella's mind. It was a gamble, a last, desperate throw of the dice, but it was her only chance. With a sudden, deliberate movement, Isabella's hand trembled, not with fear, but with a calculated tremor. The goblet tilted, and a single, glistening drop of the poisoned wine escaped, falling onto the pristine white lace of her wedding gown. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Tierry's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. Isabella, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, met his gaze, her eyes wide with feigned distress. "Forgive me, my lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a tremor that was half genuine, half artifice. "My hand. It falters. The weight of this moment, the joy, it overwhelms me." She lowered the goblet, her movements slow, deliberate, drawing out the tension. The single drop of wine on her gown seemed to glow ominously in the candlelight. The entire court held its breath, waiting for her next move, for Tierry's reaction. Isabella had bought herself a precious few seconds, a sliver of time, but it was enough. The true climax was not in the drinking, but in the refusal to drink, in the subtle act of rebellion that would reshape her destiny. The poisoned wine remained in the goblet, undrunk, its deadly contents still a threat, but now the game had changed. Isabella had taken control. The air in the grand hall, once thick with anticipation, now hummed with a different kind of tension. Isabella, her heart a drumbeat against her ribs, knew this was her moment. The refusal to drink had shattered the carefully constructed facade, exposing the venom beneath the gilded surface. She met Tierry's gaze, no longer with fear, but with a defiant clarity. The prince's face, usually a mask of aristocratic composure, contorted with a flash of raw fury. He understood. Isabella had not merely refused to drink. She had refused his control, his power, his very claim over her life. A ripple of murmuring spread through the assembled guests. Whispers of ill omens, of broken pacts, filled the silence that followed Isabella's silent rebellion. Duke Armand, Isabella's father, his face a thundercloud of confusion and alarm, stepped forward, his voice a strained whisper. He demanded an explanation. his eyes darting between his daughter and the Prince of Valois. But Isabella did not need to speak. The undrunk goblet, still clutched in her hand, was explanation enough. Before Tierry could recover, before he could spin a tale of insult or misunderstanding, Isabella performed the final, decisive act. With a swift, deliberate movement, she poured the contents of the goblet onto the polished marble floor. The dark liquid spread, shimmering ominously under the chandeliers. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers as the polished stone beneath the spilled wine began to darken, to corrode, leaving a stark, undeniable stain. The poison, so meticulously concealed, was now undeniable, a stark testament to Thierry's treachery. The hall erupted into chaos. Courtiers recoiled, gasping, pointing. The illusion of a joyous union shattered, replaced by the horrifying reality of a calculated murder attempt. Thierry, exposed and cornered, lunged, but he was quickly restrained by his own guards who, witnessing the undeniable proof, seemed to waver in their loyalty. Isabella, standing amidst the pandemonium, felt a profound sense of release. The cold dread that had clung to her for so long finally dissipated. She had faced her fear, exposed the darkness, and in doing so had reclaimed her life. The fallout was swift and brutal. The alliance dissolved, replaced by an even deeper animosity. Thierry was imprisoned, his royal ambitions crumbling around him. Isabella, no longer a pawn in a political game, emerged not as a tragic victim, but as a woman of extraordinary courage and resilience. She had defied destiny, not with a sword, but with an act of quiet defiance, forever altering the course of her own life and the history of two powerful houses. The stain on the marble floor remained, a permanent scar, a chilling reminder of the day. A poisoned wedding nearly erased a royal bloodline, but instead forged a queen. Isabella, once a symbol of fragile royal lineage, found herself adrift in the aftermath, a queen without a kingdom, a survivor haunted by shadows. The poisoned chalice had not merely claimed lives. It had shattered the very foundation of her world, leaving her with an unbearable quiet where laughter and courtly intrigue once echoed. Her initial grief, a raw, visceral wound, slowly began to calcify, transforming into a steely resolve. The girl who had dreamed of a fairy tale union was gone, replaced by a woman forged in the crucible of unimaginable loss. She spent her remaining years in quiet exile, far from the opulent, yet ultimately fatal, trappings of court. The lavish gowns were replaced by simple wool, the ornate jewels by the somber weight of memory. Her days were consumed not by political maneuvering, but by the meticulous tending of a small, forgotten garden, a poignant contrast to the grand estate she had once been destined to rule. Each budding rose, each resilient weed, became a silent testament to life's enduring, yet often brutal, cycle. The whispers of conspiracy, the lingering questions of who truly orchestrated the massacre, never fully faded. Yet, Isabella no longer sought answers or retribution. Her battle had shifted from external enemies to internal peace. She understood, with a profound and painful clarity, that some wounds never fully heal, but they can be carried with dignity. Her actions, or rather, her inaction in the face of the unfolding tragedy, had been born of naivete and an upbringing that shielded her from true malice. Now, she carried the weight of that innocence lost, a silent burden that shaped her every quiet moment. Her death, decades later, was as unassuming as her final years. No grand funeral, no royal procession. Just a simple burial, a quiet end to a life irrevocably altered by a single, catastrophic event. Isabella's story became a stark, chilling reminder of how swiftly power can be extinguished, how fragile dynastic dreams can prove, and how the echoes of a single poisoned wedding can resonate through history, forever marking the end of a royal line and the tragic transformation of a queen.